Tour of Spain continues today with stage number 7. This one, thankfully for the riders' sake, I'm sure, they're away from the hills for a while now, and a chance for the sprinters to come back into play. It's been a very tough 2 days of racing, and of course we now have a new leader in the baby-faced Óscar Sevilla. Hello again, everybody. I'm Phil Liggett, joined by just Paul Sherwin today, because Bob Roll is hot-footing it over to San Francisco so that OLN can bring you live coverage of the San Francisco Grand Prix, which will feature Lance Armstrong, and that comes to you after our coverage of this event on Sunday, so watch out for that. But let's just talk very briefly, Paul, about Roberto Heras. He had a bad day on the Sierra Nevada, but yesterday he was at the height of his form.
Well, he had to do something very special, I think, not just to convince himself that he had the form to win the Vuelta a España for a second time, but also to convince his teammates. When a rider puts in a performance like that, Phil, it really lifts the morale of the troop. I think what he also had to do on the slopes of that mountaintop finish yesterday was prove to Johan Bruneel that he really has got the form to try and win this bike race again, and that was a superb performance, and it did actually come out in his press conference afterwards that he had been to look at that climb before.
But we knew that, really, because we know how thorough his team manager Johan Bruneel really is. In fact, he checked that hill out twice, because normally you can't ride that road. It's closed to the public. It's a military road. But the man who also checked it out in the month of December, and he took all the press with him, was Óscar Sevilla, and it did pay off for him too.
It certainly did pay off. He put in an absolutely superb performance there, although he's not quite convinced at the moment, Phil, that he's going to keep the jersey all the way to the finish. He thinks he'll probably lose it in the individual time trial. But his performance on the slopes of the Pradera yesterday was absolutely superb. And at the end of it, he got the jersey that he wanted to. But it's still an awful long way to go. We've got a lot of strange stages before we get into the mountains again. But I think the two best climbers proved themselves yesterday, Óscar Sevilla and, of course, Roberto Heras.
And I think those two names are now the great favourites for this year's Tour of Spain, but there's a lot of good riders, including Gilberto Simoni, not too far behind him. Let's have a look where they all placed today. And I don't think we'll see too many changes today, but you never know. Sevilla now leading Vnukovic, who's a... Well, there's a beautiful picture as we continue to run along the bottom of Spain, heading towards the finish today in Malaga. And this... you can't really tell it from the helicopter, is a rather nasty, steady drag now, and on this long exposed road, the peloton can actually see the breakaway. They're probably about a kilometre and a half apart, Paul.
Well, it's a huge, long drag, and it takes them over these foothills around the outside of Malaga. And once they get to the summit of this, well, it's fairly flat, and it looks as if Nieto is having a bit of a problem here staying in contact with the other guys who are with him. Eliagiano, by the way, was in this breakaway, which at one time was 5 riders, but Herman Nieto right now 151st in the overall classification, almost 1 hour behind. Really can't stay, and that's probably because the tempo on the front is being set by Mariano Piccoli, who not only is a pretty good climber, but he's also a very good sprinter as well. But I think it's the end of the day for Nieto, and he will very shortly be caught by the main field right now. That service vehicle there, you can see the grey one just going up as the neutral service vehicle, and these are the 3 leaders right now. But on these long straight roads, the main field, I would think, have almost certainly got them in their sights right now.
Well, that you could see the low gear too that Herman Nieto was pedalling there inside chainring. It's a little bit steeper than they anticipated, I think, this climb here. And Van Gulen is riding very strongly. He's probably been the most aggressive rider on this year's Vuelta a España, the Belgian on the front, a newcomer to the sport, and this level anyway. And Piccoli, well, he's the old veteran who knows it all, and has been a very strong man in this breakaway, doing much more than his share of the pacemaking, keeping them together. But there's not much you can do when a rider gets completely washed out like Nieto probably has just there. He's dropped away now. We'll get caught before the summit. Now, once we get over the summit here, we'll start a sweeping fast run down towards Malaga, which will help the race reorganise itself, but it will be a very rapid run into the town today.
A front end of the main peloton. Now it's the white zebra strip of Aqua Saponi. Mario Cipollini played a waiting game, waited until the last moment. There is Mario Sierra, who's going to be the man to take up the pacemaking right now. You won't see him, but he will be in there. Giovanni Lombardi will be the last man to try and launch Mario Cipollini into orbit. Mario Sierra on the front right now. He's going to have to ride himself around about 600 metres at this speed. He will then pull off and leave the next man in the train to take up the pacemaking. Jans Verrade's men are moving up on the left-hand side for Team Lampre, but this team of Mario Cipollini is absolutely superb and dedicated to just one thing, bringing Mario Cipollini into the last 400 metres and hoping to launch him into orbit.
There's some rough riding going on at 1 kilometre to go there as they try to get Verrade into the fray. A bit of bumping and barging. Jans Verrade himself has been disqualified in situations like this before, but he's in there at the moment, also trying to get onto the back wheel. They're all fighting for the back wheel of Mario Cipollini. We can't quite see him yet from the head of the peloton, and the trees aren't helping from the helicopter either now, but he is in there. Otherwise they wouldn't be going like this. At around about 600 metres to go now. Then it comes Lombardi on the right. He's checked on his wheel first and he's locked in Mario Cipollini. They're going to have to take him from the back, and there's a little bit of elbowing there. I think Zabel did well to hang on, and he did. He's got Cipollini's wheel, so it's going to be one-on-one. But look, there's a length already between Zabel and Cipollini, and it could well be another great sprint here by Mario. Gloms is trying to get in as well for Seiko. Now he's got the lead out again. They're already saluting. It's all over. Mario Cipollini, Erik Zabel on the line. They make it look so easy.
Unbelievable. Mario Cipollini's team were completely absent with 4 kilometres to go. Then all of a sudden the front end of the main peloton was a completely white zebra strip of Aqua and Saponi, and then they did an absolutely perfect job over the last 2.5 kilometres. It's amazing the way this team just understand exactly how Mario Cipollini wants to finish the last 400 metres. Erik Zabel, Phil, was in the ideal spot, but he just did not have the acceleration to come around.
Zabel, yet again, for the 3rd or 4th time, is on the right wheel, but he hasn't got the speed to get over the top of Mario Cipollini. Oscar Freire there, just behind as well. And Sven Turtenberg, all the big sprinters right behind Cipollini. They must recognise this man in nightclubs at night by his back, because they never see his face.
They certainly don't, but look at that. He was celebrating a long way before the line, and even his teammate Giovanni Lombardi was absolutely convinced nobody was going to come past Super Mario Cipollini. Erik Zabel just had to sit there in the slipstream of him, and then coming across the line, I think for 3rd place was Sven Turtenberg from Team Phonak, and a little bit further back Alessandro Patacchi coming into sight just now, and then I think on the far side Jeroen Blijlevens is the next man.
And Glomser looked good for a while, then faded alongside with his teammate Saki, and the world champion also faded, Oscar Freire, as did Angel Edo, the rider on the Maya team. So there you are, there the big sprinters have come home again. Now by my calculations, Cipollini will just be 1 point away from the point jersey of Erik Zabel, because he gets 25 for the victory, Zabel gets 20, and there's a 6-point difference at the start of the day. He won't even be thinking about it, because by Sunday he'll be sunning himself somewhere. He's saying he's going to give up his venture around Spain and prepare for the World Championships. But he came here in determined mode, didn't he? And he now has 3 stage wins, something he's never done before in this race. And that's put him 2nd in the all-time greats list now, just 11 stage wins behind. And welcome back to our live coverage. It's stage 8 now of the Vuelta España. Yes, 1,000 kilometres have been covered, and we're now setting off from Malaga down in the south of Spain. I can tell you, in fact, 191 riders signed in, but already on a very tough route today, 6 riders have abandoned the tour, bringing the field now down to 185. Hello again, everybody. I'm Phil Liggett, joined, of course, by Paul Sherwin. Before we talk about today, Paul, let's talk about Mario Cipollini. Reminisce a little bit. It's been a marvellous week for him.
Well, Cipollini yesterday, I thought he'd got it all wrong, because just with 3 kilometres to go, there were none of his teammates anywhere near the front at all. But in the last 2 Ks, all of a sudden they were all over the front of the peloton, bringing Mario Cipollini's Vuelta stage wins to 3 in just 1 week of racing. The first one he got back in Murcia, leapt out of the pack, the first time he'd ever won a stage at the Vuelta a España, which is really quite amazing. He popped up again on stage 4 to get himself another one down into the town of Roquetas, but coming into Malaga just yesterday, absolutely remarkable, because it looked as if they'd all got it wrong. But Mario Cipollini, Phil, he's got this team exactly where he's wanted to get them. They're completely dedicated to only one thing, putting him into orbit for a win.
They are, and it's because of that. Poor old Eric Zabel had seconds and thirds, can't quite get his win yet, but he does lead in the points competition by a single point over Mario. I wonder what the team's going to do when Mario abandons this tour, as he tells us he most certainly will. Now to today. Very rough route today, very hard indeed. The temperatures are fairly high down in the south of Spain, and Paul, already the field is showing signs of cracking up.
Well, it'll take one or two riders a little bit by surprise, I would think, and it was back here in 1990 that the last Italian laid the foundations for his victory in the Vuelta a España. That was Marco Giovanetti, riding for a Spanish team at the time. One team who won't be surprised at all by today's terrain is Team ONCE, because they spend an awful lot of time training in this area because there is nothing else to do apart from ride your bike.
It is a barren area, but the roads really are very difficult. Well, before we look at the map of the route, let's have a look at the overall classification as it was this morning. Today, Óscar Sevilla is celebrating his third day as race leader. No change in the overall classification among the leaders yesterday. Vinokurov is second, Roberto Heras sitting nicely in third, Felix Garcia Casas down there in fifth place, leader of the Big Mat team. Looking further down, Iban Mayo expected to challenge as we continue in the hills, and so too Joseba Beloki, a minute and 43 seconds off for him. Completing the top 15, Francesco Casagrande. It's his birthday today, by the way. He's 11th. Gilberto Simoni, he's in 13th place, and he, by the way, is the favourite of the great Spanish champion Miguel Indurain. He says he can win this tour, and it hasn't begun yet. Try telling that to one or two of the riders, because this is a tough day, right?
It's a very difficult day, and it will catch one or two riders by surprise, because although on the profile it looks fairly easy, this 173-kilometre ride away from Malaga is certainly one that will hurt very many legs. If we have a look at the profile, Phil, we'll see there are three very difficult climbs out on the course today. The first two maybe not quite so difficult, but that last first category climb will certainly split the field.
And no sooner were we talking there about the retirement of Mario Cipollini, and moments ago, yes, he has become the latest victim of the day of cycling, and Mario Cipollini has abandoned this year's Vuelta a España. So straight away, let me give you the names of the riders we know of who've given up today, starting with Fabio Baldato, Fassa Bortolo, Steve de Wolf from Domo, Galetti from Seiko, Laurie Aus and Stefan Burgess and Thierry Loda, all of AG2R, and finally Mario Cipollini. The field is now down to 184. There we are, 11 teams still though, with all 9 men from the original 207 back at the start in Madrid. 8 days ago, Paul, we're now in this beautiful area. We've just entered the province of Cadiz, and we're waiting now for the next sprint of the day.
Well, it is a beautiful area, but not at speeds like this when you're riding a bicycle, because over the first two climbs of the day, the race absolutely exploded. There were at one stage there were 3 separate groups in front of the main field, and then we had a situation where there were 2 groups chased by 2, then a large group of 9 riders with some fairly big names in. But the situation on the road right now is this leading group of 4, containing in the yellow jersey there Aitor González de Galdiano, the yellow jersey of Team ONCE, not the yellow jersey of the team leader, but in fact they have a 2-minute 45-second advantage over the main field, which is being led by 2 teams, Euskaltel-Euskadi, the Basque team, and of course the Kelme squad, but they're having a very hard time actually eating into the advantage of these 4 riders.
They are. They've hovered at around about 3 and a quarter minutes. We've still got 2 climbs to come, or 1 big climb rather to come. The first category climb of Las Palomas, and that comes strategically placed today, just over 30 kilometres from the finish. So there's still a lot of racing, the best racing I would suggest of the stage still to come. 4 riders are clear, best placed of them Aitor González de Galdiano, but he is over 6 minutes back in the overall.
Euskaltel-Euskadi, but most of the work I think will be taken up now by the green and white jerseys of Team Kelme, and one man who's been doing a lot of work for Kelme is Santiago Botero, so obviously not nurturing any hopes at all now for a high hope in the overall classification. They're banking on just one man, and that's Óscar Sevilla.
No, he had a very rough couple of days. It cost him a quarter of an hour. Now he's very much a very valued workhorse on the Kelme squad. Here's this lovely village nestling away in the mountain tops here, and this is Sahara de la Sierra at 129 kilometres or so into today's stage. There's still about 28 miles left to race. It doesn't sound very far, except there's a big lump of granite in the way called the Puerto de Las Palomas. And that is a perfect springing off point for the finish today if anybody wants to make a go for gold. There's the time ticking away. They've closed the gap a little bit, but it's still a bit of work to be done. It is going to be quite an interesting climb just around the corner. But they're inside 2 minutes at 1 minute 51 seconds for the peloton. So everything is under control because there's nobody in that breakaway nearer than 6 minutes, the golden jersey of Sevilla. So all they're doing here is keeping a high tempo, and the in-battle continues. They're not too worried about that four-man breakaway.
Well, one man does worry them slightly. That's Aitor González de Galdiano. He's not a man you want to give too much of an advantage to, especially the climbers like Óscar Sevilla, because the man on the front here right now, González de Galdiano, may not be one of the great climbers, but he's probably one of the best time trialists here at the Vuelta a España. We get a chance now just to see what the difference is like between the tempo in the two groups. On the left-hand side, the four-man leading group. On the right-hand side, the main field, and it's starting to come back. In fact, somebody looks as if they've disappeared from there, and that will be the Croatian rider who's dropped off the back, Mikola Vejic. And he's obviously not too happy with the fact that this climb has suddenly been...
He came back up with González de Galdiano, but luck won't be with him this time, I don't think, because he started now to drop down. Here's a little bit of a contour for you. 12.7 kilometres in length, an average which is quite tough of 7.1%, and it gets tougher in gradients of 10%, as you can see, about the middle of the climb. So this is not a climb to be just ticked off as another hill on the day. This is a hard one.
Well, it's even more difficult, I think, Phil, by the fact that the tempo has been absolutely on fire since the very start of this stage this morning. In fact, we did, in the first half an hour of racing, 27 kilometres. That's 54 kilometres an hour. It might have evened off a little bit since then, but that is because of the terrain that we've been going through and the fact that the surface on these roads is certainly what is known as a very heavy surface for racing on it. It's not a smooth surface. You don't get a good rolling resistance at all on a surface like this, which is why that the average speed has come down to just outside of 41.5 kilometres an hour for the third hour of racing. Certainly there will be an awful lot of heavy bodies once we start to really get into this climb in a roundabout.
Springboard up, but look at this now. The world champion who was in the breakaway very early on today has now been dropped by the field. There are rumours, Paul, that he's again suffering from injury.
Well, he has got another bad knee, and it's a problem that he's had since the start of his career, and it is such a shame because this guy is a magnificent talent in the sport, and they've looked for all kinds of solutions to this insistent back problem he's got, which has then magnified itself into a sciatic problem and a knee problem. And I think we may well not see very much more of Óscar Freire over the next few days either, because he really needs to get himself back into form for the World Championships. And let's not forget, in the short career that he's had, he's been world champion twice.
Now this is off the back as well. This is Rubiera in trouble here. I think he's gone back to try and coax Peña back into the race, because I don't think we've got a problem with Rubiera, but look at this. I think he's got a problem with the race right now, because this is two riders, two of the Spanish boys have cracked under the pressure. Rubiera, I thought, might have come back to help out Peña, but what has happened here is he's dropped back.
Well, he's a long way down in the overall classification, time, Phil. Yeah. He's about 25 minutes behind the leader, Óscar Sevilla, so not having a great Tour of Spain for the moment. And they're going to have to do something special if they want to look after Roberto Heras, if he ever does take over the lead. Right now, the man who's leading the race is in about fourth position there in the golden jersey, just on the left-hand side, Óscar Sevilla. He looks very comfortable and very confident right now. He's riding a superb race. He reckons that he actually made a tactical error the other day on the climb of the Pandera. He'd wanted to use a 25-tooth sprocket. In fact, he told us all he was going to use one, and he only used a 23, and that put him in a little bit of difficulty. And the interesting story is that Mikel Zarbaitia, who was the leader on that day, went to his team manager and asked for a 25-tooth sprocket, and the team manager said, oh, no, he says, this is not a cyclo-tourist race. He said, you can put a 23 on and race. The man who did have a 25-tooth sprocket on was Roberto Heras.
And it paid off, yeah.
It certainly did, and he was
spinning
those legs.
But it was such a steep climb.
Oh, horrendous.
Now, it looks as though they're slowing down a little bit here. Lely just easing out of the saddle at the front. And with 1:13 the gap and an awful lot of traffic behind those three leaders, I think they'll start to empty out the gap.
He's lying 22nd overall at the moment, and he's riding himself a very sensible Vuelta a España. He seems to enjoy the Vuelta a España. He had great success last year with the win in the opening day's individual time trial and then a win on one of the road stages as well. But he said this year he wants to try and ride high in the classification. Now this is not a surprise.
No.
David Echeverria forcing the attack right now. His team did a lot of work early on. He's a great bike rider, David. He doesn't care about tactics. He never looks at the book. When he feels good, he attacks.
He's looking for the stage win, and here we go. Former amateur champion of Spain when he turned pro. Talking of David Miller, well, he's holding on to a very good position overall, and there's a long time trial in 2 days' time, 50 kilometres individual time trial. David's speciality, if he is riding this race in good condition, then he could well win that time trial, and that would lift him right up the overall classification, give him a lot of...
Here's a long and difficult climb.
Is that Cocchioli who's come up behind him? Can't quite see him at the moment.
That's one of the Jazztel riders who's come across there. It's probably Gadea who's looking to try and get himself into the move. He's been very aggressive over the last few days, looking for a breakaway situation to try and get himself into.
And it is in fact Ricardo Prieto who's come up. Valdez is... Spanish have two, both sides of the family, so they're going for Valdez. I went for the other one. Ricardo Valdez is the rider who's now joined him.
Well, there's Cocchioli suffering at the backfill. Now, that's quite a surprise there in the Alessio jersey. The leader of the King of the Mountains competition as well from Cofidis, Médéric Klein. He too may well just hold on to his lead today, because in fact it's his teammate who's garnered most of the points over the King of the Mountains places so far. Lely with the first place on the second category climb, the Puerto de las Abejas, and the third category climb, the Puerta del Viento. So he may well just hold on one more day. As we take another look at the rear end of the field, there is Cocchioli.
Yeah, wrong end, unfortunately. The man that rode so well in the Giro d'Italia slipping away there now. That was a brief look at a signboard of kilometres to go, but it was too fast for me.
Well, Echeverria now is... he's the man who started the move, but he's having a bit of a hard time staying with Valdez right now, who's accelerating on the front. Ricardo Valdez from Jazztel. They're now only 33 seconds behind the leaders. In fact, they can see one of them there, and that's probably the Croatian rider who has dropped just a little earlier on around the corner from them, Mikhailovic. And
he's done well to stay away at this speed. It is him.
I'm surprised that he actually survived that much. He's obviously been riding at his own tempo for most of this climb, but you can see the difference in the speed of these two counter-attackers right now. David Echeverria in second place there in the orange jersey, very nervous indeed. He's out of the saddle whenever he feels that he's in difficulty, but he keeps looking over his shoulders, Phil, to see what the position is of the main field. He's looking to see if there's any reaction, because
I think he's in trouble.
If there is a reaction, I think he's going to wait for the main field.
I think he's gone. I think the guy took it just a little bit too high, the tempo there, and burned him off his wheel. Let's have a look. No, that hurt David Echeverria. It took him just too high, and he's waiting for the main chase now, as indeed is Milojevic, the Croatian champion of a couple of years, and now they are back in the bunch. So just ahead we have Lely, Osa and González de Galdiano. I did catch a glimpse of them there. Now it looks as though Lely is feeling really good.
Well, he's a good bike rider, and he knows that if he can get over the summit of this climb with an advantage over the others, the main field may well sit up and allow him the advantage of a bit of freedom. He's a long way down in the classification, 45th overall, 8.5 minutes behind Óscar Sevilla, and he knows, he's an experienced professional, he knows the man they want to catch is Aitor González de Galdiano. Now the big advantage he's got is if he can just crest the summit of this climb ahead, I think there'll be a truce for a while, because I noticed just now that Team Kelme have only got one man left in that group after an awful long day's work.
With the top, and with a good piece of cornering and some tactical work down the other side, he might hang on to the finish. Anyway, they've damaged that breakaway beyond repair now, as one by one they're falling back. I would be very concerned with the whereabouts of the Seiko riders there, because I think a move is being planned.
Well, not only is Gilberto Simoni very close to the front there, but also Danilo De Luca. That will be a great 1-2. Simoni's the one with the hard shell helmet on. De Luca is the one with the small cloth hat on. But another move here coming from Ibernesto.com. This is Santiago Blanco trying to go across the front here and open up a gap over the rest of the main field. Remember, he was on the attack last year on one of the descents, and he dropped it, taking too many risks.
He certainly did. He went down with a big prang. Now then, let's see. They're on him straight away. There's Lely straight back into the pack. This is Carlos Garcia of Kelme. fighting for the right to set the pace by the look of it for his teammates, but those brutal accelerations which are coming now are going to keep on sending riders off the back of this peloton. Now there he is on the left of our picture, still about the same, another little kick of 1 in 10 as he comes around that corner. This is a long climb, some 7 miles are on this climb for. 4:04 behind overall. He's having a very good tour so far, but just take a look now what the acceleration just did by Blanco to the back of the bunch there. 6 or 7 riders losing, but certainly he's in that very select bunch down there. Well, he's still clear, but here comes the second rush at him now, and I think it is Danilo De Luca coming at him.
Well, it looks like Danilo De Luca has decided to put the acceleration on here right now.
Oh.
And in fact, it's not, it's Simoni.
It's Simoni himself. Well, this was always on the cards because they were riding tempo so near the front and waiting for the moment. Simoni, remember, has got a lot of repair work to do on this tour to come back into the action at the top, and he's got the Prime in the very last. I think that is that the summit, Paul?
Felix Garcia Casas was the man who came across in second place. This is the summit of the climb here right now, and Simoni was pretty high up in the overall classification of the King of the Mountains competition. That's why he was looking for some points there, but watch out for him continuing over the summit of Las Palomas, because I think he will try and take a few risks on the descent.
Well, it was the summit. It came on us rather suddenly, to say the least, but he timed it to absolute perfection as he goes over the top in first place. Looking down the back of the field here at the moment, as riders now going through just off the back of the race. They should get back okay.
I think that first place over the summit there should just give the new lead in the King of the Mountains competitions to Gilberto Simoni, and that's rather sad for the man who's been defending it since the very first day, Médéric Klein, who's ridden a superb start to the Vuelta a España.
But today he was in trouble.
He was having a hard time today, but I think there was a lot of riders having a hard time today. The leading group, which a few moments ago was 40 riders, I make it down to around about 25 right now as they charge off this mountain. This is a very technical and dangerous descent right now. You have to be completely alert going down this descent, and if you've got the ability to take 1 or 2 risks, I could see somebody opening up a 1-minute advantage here.
There's about 35-40 riders in this group. It'll probably get a little bit stronger as we race down towards the finish. We've now passed through the 140-kilometre point of the day. Just over 30 kilometres to race now down to the finish in Ubrique. Back on the coast again. We've had our little visit up into the hills today. Tomorrow, of course, we begin our journey through the middle of Spain as we go north away from the south. Weather might change as well, and in 2 days' time, the first long individual time trial before the first rest day on Tuesday. I think they're all pretty attentive. Now it's only a question of who can pick up the stage win. There shouldn't be any changes overall, but you never know. Well, that's the end of our half-hour free commercial, everybody. We're now going to take a break and rejoin us as we approach the finish. Too much. Well, Simoni stole the points, so we think he's enough to give him the King of the Mountains, because Médéric Klein was in real trouble at the start of the climb there. He was right on the tail of the bunch, almost certainly was tailed off on the climb. We haven't seen anything of him, and so he didn't score any points today at all. So I think he's become in second place in that competition. Here we are now as we continue through Grazalema.
Well, on the front of this group here, charging off the mountain, trying to put everybody under pressure, is still Gilberto Simoni. He loves going downhill, and he's put a lot of pressure on the Giro d'Italia in the past. And this is what it looks like at the back end of the group. If you lose 1 or 2 bike lengths, it is so very difficult to accelerate onto the tail of the man in front of you, and that's exactly why Gilberto Simoni is accelerating down here, to try and split this group and see if he can put 1 or 2 of the climbers into difficulty. He wants to climb up a little higher in the overall classification. He is looking at a podium position, but Miguel Indurain has said he feels that this man has got the possibility of winning the Vuelta a España this year, because as the race goes on, it will get more difficult. And Miguel knows what he's talking about. He said this race has not been very difficult so far, but it will get harder.
Well, that's absolutely right. The big climbs are still ahead in this race, apart from the one climb we had the other day as we descend down here just on 35 miles an hour. Simoni, the master descender, doesn't matter what the weather's like, he takes plenty of risks going down the hill, and the other riders content to just follow his wheel. I think that little group is getting a bit bigger now as we can look down the line, but our camera bikes, of course, are having their own problems now. The one at the front keeping ahead, and the one behind is having a real problem catching up. 25, almost 26 kilometres left. A lot of this is the descent downtown. There's the peloton for you. That is not much more than 25 riders in that bunch, and no sign really of others coming back on the descent.
Well, it's a difficult descent to actually get back on right now because it is so fast. I thought I caught a sight of 4 or 5 riders trying to reintegrate the main field. There is Massimiliano Lelli, who was earlier on in the breakaway. So this is probably the second group on the road right now.
Yep.
I think he's been dropped by the group of Gilberto Simoni. So just going off the back, it looks as well as if one of David Miller's teammates has got dropped there as well. He was a stage winner a couple of days ago, Guido. Well, everyone's going to be attentive. David Echevarria there, I think, is the Euskaltel rider making the counter.
They're saying it's Arabitia.
It is Mikel Zarabiti who's come out off the front. He's 8th overall. He's worn himself the yellow jersey so far of leadership. He felt that he lost it because of a technical error, a decision between himself and his team manager. He wanted to put a smaller gear on. In fact, it's Iban Mayo coming up here right now.
Well, that's curtains if it's Mayo, because there's the reaction from the field behind.
They're all over the place right now. There's a rider from Kelme coming up there just to nail back the gap. And it looks as if it's all going to come back together once more.
It's interesting to see that a rider high up in the classification like Mayo, remember he's 7th overall, a minute 14 off. They're not going to give him much of a lead, and they've pounced on it straight away. But it's nice to see these riders are looking for the moves, even at this stage of the day.
I think it's important to note that ONCE are now prepared to throw the attacks off the front of this group. They've probably noticed that there are not too many Kelme riders in the group to look after the overall leader, Óscar Sevilla, which is why they reckon it's not a bad day to go out on the attack and try and put him into difficulty. He has been isolated by the tempo of the race. There is Felix Garcia Casas in the white jersey there, and again another move going off the front here. This is Team Coast, and this looks like Manuel Beltran trying to go forward.
And the reaction a little bit slower here, but again another rider willing to try his luck and see if he can break. Well, this time they're telling us it's Luis Perez. I don't know who's spotting for the Spanish TV, but so far they've got a 100% record, as now they're coming off the front, the attack by the Team Coast rider, and the gap is opening a little bit here because Perez may be not such a wanted rider as the likes of Iban Mayo, and there's why. 11.5 minutes behind overall. It's not going to cause a major reaction yet, but they're getting themselves reorganised, and those Seiko riders of the Simoni and De Luca are again getting themselves right in the front of the frame. This is the false flat now as we head down towards the finish in Ubrique.
Seem to be sitting back and waiting are the Seiko team, who've got a two-pronged attack here right now, because they've got Danilo De Luca and Gilberto Simoni in with a chance of counter-attacking towards the end. I think if they were to play it sensibly by tactics, they would try and conserve Danilo De Luca for the end, because he's obviously the fastest man of that group.
Carlos Garcia, I think, is the Kelme rider. There's another race taking place in the nearby field as we try to locate where they've all gone. Still a reasonable way to go, but this is a good move by Luis Perez. He's taking his chance here. He's got no wins. In fact, he hasn't won a race in his career. He's had some good results. He had his best ride here in the Vuelta last year when he finished 14th overall, but he's never won a stage of anything. And this year his best result that I can find is 3rd in the Tour of Catalonia. So it would be nice to see him get the win. I suppose those are the bulls practicing for when they take them down the bull ring, which of course is a sport I think is hideous. Over to Ian as we move into the second week of the Tour. All sounds all too easy, doesn't it, until you have to pedal your bike. Here's Simoni, followed by Casasa Garcia, I think it is now, from Kelme.
Well, Simoni right now is trying to set it up for a sprint for Danilo De Luca, but it's going to be a tall order because I don't think anybody wants to chase, because right now Team Coast have got the advantage with their man Luis Perez.
Too many friends in this very select group of riders. They're desperately trying to close down on the one escaper of the day now, Luis Perez, but the gap is starting to go up.
Well, the gap has gone up to around about 53 seconds, and what's happening now is that ones and twos are trying to get off the front. So that Danilo De Luca in second position there right now. What Gilberto Simoni was doing was trying to set the tempo on the front to try and pull it all back together, but this, I would have to say, Phil, has been a very difficult stage, and everyone is throwing caution to the wind right now. There's De Luca in second position there. He really is about to make the junction, and this is a tough part of the course, and this might be the counter-attack that will succeed.
Looks like Garcia da Costa. No, it's not. It's Lestras who's gone away. We're not doing very well today, as we now see an attack here by Pablo Lestras. Big effort. He's the other tall man on the Banesto team. And De Luca's got across, but the flags have gone up again, and here comes the reaction from the back.
Well, they're not letting any groups get off the front of this breakaway right now, which is down to around about 30-odd men. In fact, it's swelled just a little bit. That acceleration has done some damage to the lone leader, Luis Perez, because it's reduced his advantage from what was almost 1 minute down to 40 seconds right now. But the pressure is certainly on in the main field. It's been a very tough day in the saddle. 15 kilometers to go right now for Luis Perez. His advantage just hovering. He's got to ride a long, hard solo to try and survive here and get himself his first ever road win as a professional bike rider, even though he's had some very high placings in the overall standings of some Taz. And the last 3 kilometers, Phil, is rather dodgy. We're looking here at Luis Perez just hoping to survive. He's actually tailing the motorbikes there just a little bit. It's the motorbike's fault, not the riders. He's taking advantage of that, but the motorbikes on this descent can't in fact get away quick enough from the riders that are there preceding.
Well, just look at the speed of the peloton, which is swelled now to 36 riders down there. So 1 or 2 have bridged the gap from behind. Not many, though, considering they must have really blown badly on the climb once the attacks came. Here we have a glance of Perez as he charges down to the valley below and the finish, but it is not an easy finish. It is a 5% gradient up to the finishing line. It is not a sprinter's delight by any manner of means, and yet somebody like Angel Edo, who is in this group today, might find himself a stage winner if he could get the whole race back together again. He's done well to survive in this company.
Well, the last 3 kilometers is very complicated. They come into town, they've got a hairpin bend at 2.5 kilometers around the town and almost around the finishing straight before they then come into the last 1.5 kilometers, and they're actually slightly uphill at 5%. That's 5 kilometers to go right now. That's going to take them around about...
As we now see that small group looking at each other, saying who's next to have a go. 10 seconds to González, 16 seconds of the spread. So they must be able to catch a glimpse of this leading rider on these last sets as we go down the mountain. There is one top left. There is Aitor González in the middle, and keep looking right. Here comes the cavalry, because I reckon there's 35 riders there now. As they come off that bend, it is going to be a terrific finish, and it looked like De Luca there leading them down the mountain, but very, very quickly indeed.
Well, this is a very technical part of the descent right now. Aitor González is not really very far behind the lone leader, Luis Perez, and as we get a check here, in fact, it was 6 kilometers to go to the finish right now, so a false call there on the 5 kilometers to go, and I bet this man wishes it had been just 5 kilometers as he goes around the outside of the curve right now. This is a very tricky last few kilometers into town.
It certainly is. There's González through now, the same banner. But you know, they're keeping out of sight, and that's the most important thing at the moment. The peloton preoccupied by these very tight bends here. They really must concentrate. You can't afford to lack any concentration now. As they come off that bend, you can see the bunch has grown quite considerably. 1 or 2 riders getting back as the descent now straightens out a little bit as we're entering only the last 3 miles of racing to the line now. I'm beginning to hope that Perez makes it, because can you imagine what it will feel like having been a pro since 1995 and you win a stage of the West. A little bit too low. Now the peloton are making. González is safely around. We go back to the leader now, looking for the 1,000 meter kite. You know, I think he just might do this, and this is going to be his first ever win.
Well, it's going to be touch and go. He's managed for the last 10 kilometers just to hold on. Another right-hand bend, and he's pushing it to absolute limits here, Phil, to try and get as much speed as he can round these corners, but he's still got acceleration in his legs. He's picking it up once more, up to around about 50 kilometers an hour. He's got a long straightaway. Once he gets to the end of this, there's a little chicane, and he will see the Flamme Rouge, the red kite, indicating just 1,000 meters to go, and his first ever win as a professional bike rider. Aitor González is just a little bit further back, around about 9 seconds. There's the banner he's been dreaming of now, Phil, for about 15 kilometers.
Well, thank heavens that this wasn't the finish of a massed bunch sprint, because there would have been carnage on the run-in, but the organisers knew that. They weren't expecting the race to come in a bunch of 180 riders here. Look at the crowd as they've waited for the arrival of the Tour of Spain. And there's another rider got away there, and he might well have reached Aitor González, but we'll check that out. I think that was possibly Danilo De Luca as well. But this man has got the little rise up to the line now, and that's not going to spoil his day. He's got a few flicks and a sharp turn, and then he'll see the finishing line. And this is going to be just reward for a man who's waited for 7 years to win a pro bike race, and he's doing it in style.
Well, the pain will go away right now. He'll turn just to the left in a few moments' time. He will see the finishing straight in front of him. He'll see the banner, and he'll know that he will survive. They're breathing down his neck, but they're not going to catch him right now. There's a huge crowd have turned out here, Phil, for this stage of the Vuelta a España. He's just waiting to get round each final corner there. He can see it's around about 250 metres to go, but this is a tough climb up. It's 5%.
They're taking the cameras away.
That may well be because they're closing down the gap behind him.
This is going to be, we can't see behind at the moment because of our cameras. It can't be far away from the chasers now. This is a nasty little climb up to the finishing line here. Where is he? Coming around that corner, Luis Perez, we hope, but they're right up there on him now. They're not quite to him as the race behind splits up. Here he comes, it's touch and go. González is on his wheel here, and it's going to be desperately close. He looks over his shoulder and he's going to lose it on the line, Paul. Aitor González has got him and is waiting. Now, is he going to take it away from him? There's nothing Perez can do about it. He has been passed by González. Here comes David Echevarria. Now, can he at least hold on for second? I don't think so. He's beaten in sight of the line, and that is terrible. González wins. Perez will take third. Second will be Echevarria. Well, you've got to feel sorry for him today.
Well, that final little kick up to the line was what sealed his fate there, and in fact Danilo De Luca got up there into fourth place. But it was so close for that man. He'd held on to that 10-second advantage, and he just crumbled in the last 100 metres. Well, that was a bit of viciousness thrown in there by the race organisation, because that lost it for this man. And Aitor González, in fact, will not get the jersey, but he was showing to the rest of the team that he's just as good as the man who's leading right now. Individual time trial, but also be a very difficult man to dethrone by his own teammate Óscar Sevilla.
And Sevilla's lead after 29 hours in the saddle, still the same as it was at the start of the day, 14 seconds over Vinokurov, but his teammate González now comes into third slot. Down by 1 place it goes Roberto Heras. He's now 48 seconds back. 177 riders are left in, 12 retired yesterday. And welcome to the first of a double header for us here on OLN, because after coverage of the Tour of Spain, we'll whisk you back to San Francisco for the San Francisco Grand Prix with Lance Armstrong. Well, I'm Phil Liggett, joined of course by Paul Sherwin, and we've seen the race open up a little bit more yesterday, Paul, that hill towards the end, but it did project, as we've all suspected, a strong ride by Gilberto Simoni.
Well, I think Simoni will be quite happy with where he is at the moment. He's 13th overall at the start of the day, a minute 49 back, but there's still an awful lot of time trialling to go and an awful lot of mountain riding as well. Simoni looks very comfortable. I think a little bit frustrated by the fact that he feels somewhat marked by all of the Spanish riders, but let's not forget he is a former great winner, and he had a good day yesterday because he also took the lead in the King of the Mountains competition. But we must never forget this man is already a winner of a Grand Tour. He wanted to win the Giro d'Italia this year, and I think he's going to bide his time because the last week of the Vuelta a España is going to be very difficult, and he'll be ready for that.
It is indeed, and you know, we're a little bit worried about the strength of US Postal. Roberto Heras certainly very strong, and he's looking very good, but the same can't be said for the rest of his team.
Well, it's always very strange. It does take a situation where Roberto Heras was to get a lot closer to the top of the leaderboard, and I think we could see a complete change in the whole of the team because they would then rally round. Roberto Heras himself, he came out and he won the mountain top finish a couple of days ago up to the summit of Pandera, and on that situation he proved to the team that he was able to ride. But the rest of the team, Rubiera, the man who is normally a very good climber for him, Christian van der Velde, having a good ride on a couple of the big mountain top finishes, but even yesterday he was caught out with a little mechanical incident, and the fact that they've also lost a rider this morning, Michael Barry. The team is weakened, but I do think if Heras has a chance to win this, the team will turn around and support him.
Well, the accident to Barry, a little bizarre, because apparently yesterday he was run down by an official race motorbike and as a result couldn't start this morning because of injuries received then. Anyway, the race goes on. The man in the golden jersey, of course, is Óscar Sevilla. Let's have a look behind and won't get back. Just take a look down that road now as they're catching once more the crosswinds. This is a veritable team time trial by ONCE, Paul, and they're causing an incredible amount of damage.
and an incredible amount of pain for the riders in the back there. You can see that group has split completely once again. You can see the time gap from the GPS right now on the motorbikes. The front of the bike race to the group containing Mancebo and Danilo De Luca is now approaching 4 minutes, and Team ONCE know this area very well. They work together as a team. A couple of days ago people were saying, no, it doesn't look as if ONCE are riding too well right now, but I think they will ride a lot stronger when we get into the last week of racing.
Well, looking there at the rider from ONCE, number 163 is Acevedo. He's got it right this time. The Phonak rider nearest the camera is Bergman.
That was the third group on the road then. They're an awful long way behind right now, 4 minutes back. But ONCE have decided to try and split this race once again. Deserves to get himself back into the front end of the main field. Eric Zabel will be very happy with this situation now, as the teams of the sprinters are the ones who are controlling it at the front end, and they're trying to slow it down so that men like Pataki and Eric Zabel don't get tailed off towards the summit. But it was still a hard enough tempo for one or two riders to get popped off the back there of that group.
You could see more than one or two, and clearly a lot of tired legs here, but maybe a bit of strength here in Cauchioli coming up to help out Dario Cioni, because Cauchioli is a rider who is not on great form in this race, but of course he is a very good rider, and that's something he's no doubt thinking about.
Well, Cauchioli a long way down in the overall classification in this race, but we have seen him ride superbly in races like the Giro d'Italia, where he excelled this year. I think a lot of the Italians here are using this race to try and get themselves formed for the World Championships, which they think they've got a great chance of winning this year with Mario Cipollini. But I think the World Championships is never decided by a bunch sprint, Phil, and I think we will see rather a good defence by Óscar Ferreira, who hopefully can get himself right by the end of the Vuelta a España and get rid of that tendinitis problem that he's got and get himself into good shape. Now this is an interesting situation right now. There are 3 Italians cruising off the front of the...
Now it looks like we're approaching the top, or are we? We're crossing the main road and continuing to climb for a moment. And everybody now seeing this, looks like it's Francesco Casagrande who's now starting to stretch the legs. I really expect Simoni to put an appearance in up here. There's the two that were away, Cauchioli and Cioni, passed by Francesco Casagrande, and I think it's Klaus Mola on his wheel now, the MSS rider who rode well in the mountains towards the end last year, as they're coming up towards, I think, the summit, but we haven't seen the banner yet.
Well, Francesco Casagrande for his first time in this year's Vuelta a España, stretching out his legs there, and I have to say looking rather good and confident as well. He's kind of rider who could possibly come up with the win at the Vuelta a España. He's lost a bit of time so far. He's currently down in 11th place in the overall classification, and the fact that he has come to the front has forced one or two other riders to pay a little bit more attention. There's the golden jersey of the leader, Óscar Sevilla. Not too far away, in about 5th position there is Roberto Heras in the blue jersey of US Postal Service, and in about 7th or 8th position there in the red shorts and the orange jersey, that is Gilberto Simoni wearing the leader's jersey of the King of the Mountains, and I think he will accelerate once we get to the summit, because I have a feeling he wants to win that competition.
They're all watching each other, and because they're all at the front, they're not going to make many mistakes. And look at this now, it's just, is he going to make it? He looks over his shoulders. It is desperately close, but they're going to come at a big rush. I don't think he is.
Well, it was a good move by him. He maybe should have just held back slightly to stay in contact there, and he just held on to get maximum points. And Simoni, I think, just came across the line in 3rd place there.
Garcia Casas taking 2nd. Now, we're 10 miles from the finish. And now it's not all downhill, but we've a bit of a swoop for the time being as the riders now make their way back down. Yecker and Perez have just been joined by Pablo Lastras, one of the few men to get into this group from Benesto, because the rest of them were left behind chasing all day.
Well, this is a very tricky descent right now after that little bit of a surprise for everybody. That short 1 kilometre climb that came at just 12 kilometres to go. These 3 riders have joined forces at the front. Yecker in the middle there with Perez, the man who was so close to winning the stage yesterday, and they've just been joined by Pablo Lastras. But the main field are in one big long line at the moment, and the time gap between the 2 groups, Phil, is not very much more than 10 seconds. There are the 3 leaders just going around that corner at 8 kilometres to go right now. 5 miles of racing left to the finish, and there is the main peloton as well, which we now know contains the leader of Team Telecom, the man who wears number 211, Eric Zabel.
Well, Eric will be very unhappy if he gets beaten in the sprint now by 3 opportunists, but it's always possible. There they go under that 9 kilometre banner. Lestras is a strong rider. He won a stage of the Tour of Italy last year, and he's only won a couple of races in his life, but one of his other big stage wins came in the Tour of Portugal back in 1999. And he's not afraid to go down hills quickly either. Breaks late, right knee out, swings into the apex of that corner. He's hurting, in fact, Fabian Jekke here, who's not quite so confident to follow him down the mountain.
Well, Lestras is taking those corners to absolute perfection right now, and he knows this is a great chance. And in fact, in second position,
gone.
Perez, who we saw yesterday in a little bit of difficulty on the descents as well, is not going round these corners quite as fast. They're backing off just a little bit, and once you get the gap like that, well, then you know you've got the confidence going into the corners. Pablo Lestras riding away from his two breakaway companions right now at unbelievable speeds, but they still feel, you see, the main field is still around about 10 or 12 seconds behind, so it all could very much come together inside the last kilometre. And I think that banner there with 7 kilometres to go was just a little bit too low, and I wouldn't like to be in
the line. It's pushed him from first to third. He better watch out, because he could be caught on the line again now by the sprinting group. They're about 10 and 15 seconds back, and that group really is very small now, so hats off to a sprinter like Zabel surviving today in that sort of elite company. There we are, 21 seconds, but that, I think, is the gap back to the two chasers. This is the long straight road, and at the end of it is the kilometre bridge. He is now 1,100 metres from the finish, and I don't think they can catch him. Like a wise man, he's just seeing what's required to win the day.
A quick check, looking over his shoulders to see what the gap is. The gaps are all completely open right now. The only thing between him and the two chasers is the motorbike from the television camera at the moment. He's cruising into town, a little chicane here right now, and very shortly he'll come into the last 500 metres. He's done enough to survive, and he built the foundations of that victory, Phil, on the descent by going down there like an absolute maniac, although he looked pretty controlled to me.
These two, Fabian Jekke and Luis Perez, are still willing to work together. They can't afford not to here, because there's the field, what's left of it right behind them. There will be changes overall today. Out of the race, Mancebo loses 15th. Danilo De Luca slips from 12th because he's lost at least 10 minutes today. But it's all over now. Pablo Lestras, who last won stage 11 of the Tour of Italy in May in the town of Gorizia, is now going to make amends for a victory in the Tour of Spain here in Cordoba. And as you can see, the weather is closing in on the riders too, but it won't make any difference for this man, because on a day Benesto had all sorts of problems, at least they got the stage winner in Pablo Lestras.
Absolutely superb win by that man. He built it all on the descent, and the two men caught in the middle have just managed to survive as well. It's a big sprint up to the line right now, and I think poor old Perez is going to have to settle for second place again today as he comes across the line just in front there of Jekke.
Yes, Perez gets second, third yesterday, and Zabel finishes it off. No, he doesn't. I don't think he did anyway. I think he just got pipped by the sprinter there from Kelme, which is probably going to 14-second deficit. Aitor González 41 and Roberto Heras 48, Minito 1 there, just the same as it was this morning. They all paid attention, you see, and they hung on in there well, and they kept an eye on everybody.
This man was attentive from the start. He had a large number of his teammates always alongside him, and in fact on the early part they were very dominant in keeping the tempo high to try and get rid of riders like Mancebo and of course Danilo De Luca, who I'm not sure really was thinking about a high place in the overall classification here, Phil. I think really Danilo De Luca was a bit relaxed and quite happy now, I think, to look after his own teammate Gilberto Simoni.